Ben Simmons just can't catch a break, can he? From spending a good part of the last 2 years sidelined with injuries and, well, issues, he has finally returned to NBA action, and it's not going very well for the Australian. In his only 3 appearances for the Nets, Simmons has been fouled out twice, and it's been nothing short of a bumpy return to action. Let's begin. Starting with, Ben Simmons fouls out again. In the Nets' 134-124 loss to the Grizzlies, Simmons took another blow by fouling out twice in 3 games. It's a clear show of impatience from the first pick of the 2016 draft, and it's a shame because his fans have waited a long time to see him back in action. We're not saying that he has not waited long enough, but these are silly mistakes, and he can't keep on getting away with it. As a defender, you've got to make fouls, but it's also important to keep a track of them. Missing out and going over the limit once is understandable and can be adjusted, but it's certainly not okay if it happens twice in 3 matches and it costs your team too. Plus, this one was hardly an example of professional play from Simmons. If you're on your 5th foul, there's no reason to go charging into a ball the way he did. We'll examine that in detail and put your team in danger of losing the match, which they did. Until that point, he had recorded 7 points, 8 assists, 3 rebounds, 5 turnovers, and a steal in 28 minutes. That's not impressive, but these numbers would be fine if he wasn't getting fouled out so consistently. Plus, he should be grateful that Steve Nash hasn't got a clue about coaching, so all he does is motivate them, because any half-decent coach wouldn't be okay with the way Simmons got himself out of the game in their defeat to the Grizzlies. Taking a look at the final foul. The foul that got Simmons out was something of a funny moment for Twitter. It frustrated the 26-year-old, of course, but social media and analysts were having a great time discussing this brain fart from Simmons. Morant, the young superstar and the new face of the Grizzlies, was having a great night, and he decided to make it even better by gambling in the final minutes of the game. His side had the lead, and he knew that getting under the skin of Brooklyn might be a good idea. It was a fantastic idea. He let the ball roll up the court before finally picking it up and waiting. Like clockwork, Simmons approached him and immediately lunged, contacting Ja, and almost instantly the whistle was blown and Simmons was out. When you look at the game situation, you can't help but feel that this was an extremely pointless decision from Ben, but then again, you could say that about many moments in his career. Kyrie had just cut the lead to 6 with 4 minutes to play, and the Nets actually stood a chance of making a comeback. But Ben Simmons and his impatience ended up costing his team twice in 3 games. But in Simmons' defense, these things do happen. Our only issue is that this shouldn't become a routine. Hopefully he learns from this experience and fixes up, because defending Giannis won't be easy. Not to mention, Ja planned it all. The play that invited Simmons' lunge and his 6th foul was actually something that the Grizzlies and Ja in particular had worked on before the match. Talking to the media, Morant explained after the match how he'd tempted Simmons into making that lunge, and it was something that he'd picked up from a previous instance a few years ago. It's fabulous thinking on Ja's part, and it takes a lot of courage to attempt something of the sort. Obviously, Morant's the exact opposite of Simmons in this regard, because he's full of confidence, so he would have definitely attempted it, but the explanation shows just how genius it was from the 23-year-old. He added that as soon as the ball rolled up, he knew that Simmons would make the lunge, and that's why he waited and believes that he had him. He was going to press up, and I was just going to force the ref to make the call. And if you think about it, Ben getting done because of forensic analysis is almost poetic justice. We know he's trying, but the lack of effort on his part is something that costs his sides many times, and the fact that Ja pulled this off purely because he pays attention to detail shows the difference in professionalism between the 2 players. Next, Steve Nash blames rust for Simmons fouling out. The Nets coach, though, jumped to Simmons' defense after the match. He was there for the Australian after the first match too, and his point was still the same. Nash believes that the rust is responsible for Simmons' troubles, and the fact that he hasn't played any basketball for 18 months clearly shows. This might be one of the few times when we agree with Nash. He's correct. Simmons has been without any playing time, and that's bound to bring some troubles. Once he gets his confidence and familiarity with the game back, it will help him get back to the levels he was enjoying in his first couple of seasons in the NBA. A long period of inactivity, as Nash puts it, can be tough to return from, and Simmons, as we all know, has been struggling with injuries and some mental troubles too. The impatience part is a little unprofessional, and he'll obviously need to fix that up because the Nets have the pieces to challenge, and it'd be a proper shame if they couldn't because of these little shortcomings. Moving on, Simmons urged to play smarter. As someone who lacks the explosive touch, Simmons has been clever enough to mold his game around his shortcomings and still be an incredible player in the NBA. That's not easy to do, but maybe he needs to bring that X factor in the way he defends as well. His fouls in the match against Memphis were pretty much avoidable, and it would have been better if he'd gotten away with at least a couple of them. While the refereeing was As per Simmons, it's also embarrassing that he hasn't been able to find a clever way of getting away with some of those calls or making a smarter decision in those particular moments. For instance, his first 2 fouls were a pair of off-ball screens. We know that isn't an easy role to play, and you can struggle when you're not used to doing it, but the way he stuck his elbow out made it an easy spot for the officials. If he can just hold his position on screens, Ben will be able to avoid those offensive fouls, and that's where his teammates can help too, because if they take more responsibility, it'll be fine. However, you can't expect that to happen immediately given the lack of chemistry between the players. Also, is it a problem of dealing with imposing front courts? The Nets have generally struggled with imposing centers throughout the season. Of course, it's only been 3 games, but in all 3 games, Jonas Valanciunas, Pascal Siakam, and Steven Adams all enjoyed a lot of freedom, and that helped their sides dominate proceedings against the Nets. So, as much as we want Simmons to fix up, the problem is that the Nets don't have an imposing center themselves, and that means they find it very hard to keep the physical side of things level, especially against the opposition's front court. Maybe a change in Ben's position could help, but the problem is that the Nets have failed to add to their roster, and without a proper center, they might struggle to win games against teams deploying big men, which is most of the NBA these days. Their next challenge is playing against the Milwaukee Bucks, and it'll probably be the toughest test for Simmons and his Brooklyn side. Giannis is probably the most dominant player in the league, and Milwaukee will be hoping to get Brook Lopez more and more involved in the game, knowing that the Nets have an obvious weakness. Finally, Simmons and the Nets need to improve in-game IQ. As we mentioned before, the fouls from Simmons had a clear pattern. They were all avoidable opportunities. So how can the Nets learn from it? Well, their problem is pretty big because these are things that the coaches need to spot. Now, we don't mean to say anything rude about Nash, but his coaching abilities are limited, and that's a known fact at this point. So it's something that the players will need to adapt to on their own as well. This means Simmons will need to take responsibility and act as an experienced head in the franchise, and while he's playing for a new team and in a new system, he'll need to learn quickly and on the job. Hopefully, his surrounding players are also up to the task and help him out. After all, Brooklyn's season depends on it. That's a wrap for this video. Do you think Ben Simmons can get back to his best? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.